Hi and welcome to the Home Assistant How-To with Bearded Thinker. Today we will be talking about Shelly. We will not be talking about any specific device, but overall about Shelly integrations inside Home Assistant. We'll start in 10 seconds. But before we begin today's episode, as always, I really would like to thank all the members who have joined my channel. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Your support really means a lot. And now let's get cracking with the video. If you are on the market for a IoT device, such as, relay for the wires for the garage door or for the lights, or if you are looking for the light and you do not want to go either Zigbee or Z-Wave standard, or on the other hand, if you are looking for something else, such as energy monitoring, gas sensors, humidity temperature sensors, etc., one of the names that has been very popular recently is Shelly. Yes, of course, there are Sonoff ripoffs, and other third-party devices, but today we will be talking only about Shelly devices. If you have been following me on the YouTube, checking my videos, or maybe joining the live stream, then you definitely know that I am using Shelly devices. For now, I have been only using two devices. One is the Shelly Plug S, this is the smaller plug, and the other device that I was using was the Shelly EM, energy monitoring device. One device I'm using mostly to monitor power consumption of the specific devices, such as fridge, dishwasher, or the washing machine, while the other device is used to monitor the overall consumption of electricity in my house. I do still have options to grow, both in terms of a variety of devices that Shelly provides, but also what I can do with devices I already own. I have ordered and received one additional Shelly device, and this Shelly device will be subject of my next week's video. This will be Shelly CNG gas sensor. Everybody is covering specifics of each of those devices. What I wanted to cover today is some of the things that are common to all Shelly devices and show you how you can integrate them inside Home Assistant. I know of at least three options. One option I will not be covering, and that is MQTT. The other options I will cover in today's video is Home Assistant integration Shelly. This is built-in integration inside Home Assistant, and what I prefer, for now at least, is ShellyforHASS. This integration is a custom component that you can install via HACS. But before we go any further, let's talk about what Shelly makes. Shelly creates four types of devices. We have relays, then we have what they call plug and play. These are the power outlets, bulbs, etc. Then we have sensors, such as humidity sensor, flood sensor, door window sensor, my new purchase Shelly Gas, and Shelly Smoke. And if I'm not mistaken, Shelly Smoke is not available, but it will be available soon. And third type of devices is accessories. These are Shelly button, power supply for Shelly humidity and temperature sensor, temperature add-ons for Shelly 1 and 1 PM devices, and current transformers. It doesn't matter what kind of a device, is it a relay, plug and play, or sensor that you want to add to Home Assistant, there are a bunch of ways how you can use them. First, you can use Shelly Cloud. This is the native Shelly-made and Shelly-owned cloud service that you can use via their app. The next option you have, and some people use it, is to enable MQTT on the Shelly device itself. This Shelly device can be Shelly Plug, Shelly Vintage Bulb, or any of the Shelly 1, 2s, 3s, etc. So why did I make this video? Because I think it's fair enough to talk about Shelly devices with Shelly firmware, with no data going to the cloud and still having integration about Home Assistant. Yes, of course, you have option to flash Tasmota or ESP Home on them, but I wouldn't do that, or I don't do that. Why? Because Shelly firmware on its own is a very solid piece of software. So today we'll be talking about two options, as I mentioned. One is native HA integration that has become available in the version 0.115. And the next option is the ShellyforHASS custom component available through HACS. So let's get started. Presumption for the next step is that you have your Shelly device already connected to the electricity, that you did connect to it via Wi-Fi and configure your Wi-Fi connection or Wi-Fi SSID, and also that you configured either the DHCP, which is the default one, or the static IP address. When you finish configuring your Wi-Fi, your device will disconnect and reconnect to your Wi-Fi network, and then you will be able to access it with the predefined or DHCP IP address. What you have to do in Home Assistant. Actually, there are two ways of integrating Shelly inside Home Assistant, and there are pros and cons for both of them. First of all is to use internal Home Assistant integration. It's called just Shelly. We'll cover that one first. In the process, I will be showing you what you get with the one type of integration and what you will get with the other type of integration. But please remember, for this first integration, you only need to have Home Assistant installed. Nothing extra, no custom components, no anything. If you do receive notification here, new device is discovered, check it out, and your Shelly devices will be visible here. Remember that if your devices are not visible here, this also is perfectly normal. What you would do then is you would go to Add Integration, type here Shelly, and insert here the IP address of each specific device you want to add. But since all of my devices have been discovered, I will close this and I will start configuring each one of them. So what I have here Shelly plugs, 1, 2, 3 of them. I have Shelly EM, and I also have Shelly gas, which will be covered in the video next week. Let's start with the Shelly plug. I'll press Configure, Submit. I will select an area and finish. Now that we have first Shelly device, let's see what type of entities did we receive with it. So we have one device, and this device is providing following information. Is it turned on or off, meaning the relay on it, is it turned on or off? What is the energy use? Is it overheating? Is it overpowering? And what is the current power consumption? There are 5 disabled entities. This here gives you the status of the cloud. This one gives you information if there is a newer version of firmware available or not. This one gives you information about device temperature. Here is the information about RSSI, and this one gives you information about the uptime. So, if I would add additional Shelly plugs, number of devices would rise, but also the number of entities. Let's add also those two. Now we have 3 Shelly plugs, each has 1 device and 10 entities, and each one should have those same 10 entities, with 5 available and 5 unavailable. Now let's add Shelly EM. This is a different type of device, so it should have additional entities also. Configure, Submit, and let's check what we have for Shelly EM. We have 1 device, but we have 14 entities. Since this is a power measuring device that can track electricity being produced or consumption of the electricity, we have different type of sensors. There are 2 channels, so we have channel 1 and channel 2. I'm currently using only channel 1, but for example, if you have a house and solar panels, you can use channel 1 for the grid connection and channel 2 for your solar grid. We have here switch, information about the energy usage, energy returned, power voltage, for channel 1 and channel 2, and also information about overpowering. Information about cloud, firmware, RSSI, and uptime is also not available here. So the question you may ask yourself is, why would you use any other integration than this one? Well, let's look at this one here. We have 1 device and 14 entities. Let me quickly delete this. And let's go to HACS. HACS, Integrations, plus to explore or add, ShellyforHASS, install this repository. We will be using the latest version. Latest version at the time of recording is 0.2.1. Install. Of course, we have to restart our system for changes to take effect. Let me quickly do that. Unfortunately, we'll still need to restart system once more. After our system boots back up, we will go to Visual Studio Code or Code Editor and there add a couple of lines to our configuration.yaml file. Now that our system is back online, let's go to Visual Studio Code, and at the bottom of the file I will be adding comment and the only line we need in our configuration.yaml file for this custom component to be activated. It's Shelly. To be honest, I also add 2 additional lines or 3 lines or 2 commands. First one is version, true. This will give you the version of the sensor. And also I add sensors to list all the sensors I want and add all. This way I get all the sensors I can from each of the Shelly devices. This here will be enough for you to get all the Shelly devices in your system up and running. There is one additional thing. If you are having problems with mDNS and your system is unable to locate files on your network, you can force discovery by adding following command. Discover by IP. And then just list all the IP addresses of your devices. So 192.168.1.1.1, 192.168.1.1.1.2, etc. Simply just list here all the IP addresses of your Shelly devices. But since I will not be using it, I will comment it out. Next thing, of course, is to go back to configuration, server control, check configuration, and we will once again restart our system for HACS component or custom component ShellyforHASS to be activated. Let's go to configuration, integrations. And as you can see, we already have 6 devices automatically added. This time we haven't used internal integration, but instead we used ShellyforHASS. Let's see those devices. This device gives information about the version of ShellyforHASS. And then we have all the other devices. I will not be giving you spoilers about GAS, but let's check Shelly EM. As you can see here, we have a bit more entities than we had with the native Home Assistant integration. Other entities that were not available when using internal Home Assistant integration are currently available. This is the status of the cloud, which is disconnected, status of the MQTT, which is also disconnected. Is it currently in the overpower? Not. And there are 2 RSSI sensors. One is giving you the decibel information, and the other one is giving you the, let's call it that, verbal information about your Wi-Fi link quality. We also have the same thing that we had previously. This is the information about the total watts used, total kilowatt hours, and also the current watt usage. Let's go back and check the plugs. Same thing here. We have the information or status about the plug. Is it turned on or off? Current watts usage, cloud information, temperature of the device, is the MQTT on or off, overpower information, over temperature information, RSSI information, total kilowatt hours used, uptime, and is there an upgrade for firmware available or not. Let's create new card. Let's go back to configuration, integrations, and let's slowly add all those devices to our Shelly card. Well, almost all devices. Let's go to Overview, Shelly, and we now have Shelly EM plus Shelly 3 plugs here. As I said, there are a bit more sensors available here than in the internal Home Assistant integration. Please bear in mind that this is true at the time of the recording. Who knows, maybe in the next release or in 2 releases, all the sensors or all the entities that are available here will also be available inside Home Assistant. So, what am I using? Well, that's a good question with a silly answer. I'm using both. What it means is that I firstly added devices using Shelly, and then I also added the custom component ShellyforHASS. That means that I'm using both internal integration for the Shelly, but I'm also using this integration. And can they coexist? Yes, they can. But if you first add your devices using custom component, you will not be able to add them through the internal integration. So if you want to be using two integrations, which honestly I do not know why would you be using, but yeah, I'm using it, you first have to add them using the internal integrations from the Home Assistant and then just install the HACS custom component. But let's talk about Shelly integrations overall. So why am I not using cloud, or why am I not using MQTT? That's a very good question and I do not have answer for you. In my opinion, but I may be wrong, I was looking for something that allows me to keep all the information about the sensors I use or devices I use inside my network. So that's why I'm not using cloud services from Shelly or mostly from anybody else, with of course exception of the devices that cannot operate without it, such as Google Home. So in this case, I'm not using cloud, but I'm also not using MQTT. Could I use it? Yes, of course, but in my opinion, using COAP and REST has a better response than using MQTT. I may be wrong, I never tested, this may be completely made up in my head, but I do really think that direct communication between those devices and Home Assistant should respond better or faster than by using cloud or MQTT. What happens if the Home Assistant goes down? That's a good question. Unfortunately, in that case, I would have to get Home Assistant back online, but I also have ability to use web interface of the devices. So in theory, if my web goes down, I can use this to control my Shelly plugs, either through my computer or my mobile phone. Let's also talk about the availability of the Shelly devices. As you can see, each of my devices has a bit different Wi-Fi quality of the network. Shelly EM is very good, two of the plugs have good, but I also have one that has a weak connection. And yes, unfortunately, in the last year and a half or something like that, that is the time I've been using Shelly devices, I did have to manually reset a device at least 2 times, I think, so far. And by manual resetting, I'm thinking about disconnecting the plug and reconnecting it back to the power grid. And this only happened to one single device, which is a bit further away than all the other devices. What happens with the devices when the power is restored after power failure? Well, good question. In the settings, power on default, you can select what you want with this device to happen per device. Do you want it to be on when the power is restored? Do you want it to go to off status when the power is restored? Or do you want to restore the last state? For most of my devices, I turn them on because I'm not using those power plugs to control devices. Instead, I'm using them to measure the power consumption. For example, washing machine, dishwasher. There are some other devices that I do control, such as my 3D printer, and for this one I'm using off state, meaning that if the power is restored, I want it to be turned off. Most probably my 3D print will fail. Although I do have resume on power failure, I still want to be able to manually control what will happen with that specific device. So to ensure that everything goes smoothly, I use for 3D printer off status. I know that this video was a bit different than the other videos, but before I do video about the Shelly gas, but I wanted to talk about the options you have when you are using Shelly, that you do not have to flash them with any third-party firmware, which in my opinion will reduce the functionality of this device. Sure, Tasmota, great. ESP Home, fancy, but for the Shelly devices I would definitely stick with the original firmware. Second thing I wanted to talk about is how you get the information or integration with Home Assistant. You do not need a cloud account, you do not need MQTT, you can use COAP and the REST command both from Home Assistant integration, internal integration, and for the Home Assistant for HACS, and both work great. No information is provided to the cloud, everything stays in your network, and everything is fast and reliable. There is one additional option that has been introduced, is that devices now can be rebooted when the Wi-Fi connection is lost. I have them all enabled, which means that if the device loses the internet connection or connection to the Wi-Fi, it will reboot to try to renegotiate the Wi-Fi. And this is it for this Home Assistant how-to with Bearded Thinker. I really would like to hear what are your preferred options for connecting Shelly devices. Also, if you are using, for what purpose are you using them? Not the integrations, but the Shelly devices themselves. If you still have a comment or a question about this video or any of my previous videos, you can always find me on the Discord server, but also feel free to leave a comment down in the comment section below. If you do not want to miss my next video about Shelly gas sensor that I'll be covering next week, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell button. And I'll be seeing you next time. Until then, bye bye and have fun.